Okay, I'm going to call the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee to order. The date is June 2nd, 2025. It is 7 p.m. and we are in the Aldermanic Chamber. It's been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website, in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91A. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Tim Sennett is here. Alderman Tom Lopez.
He's supposed to attend remotely, but I don't see him yet.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for him. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens, Vice Chair.
Here.
And Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly, Chair.
I'm here.
We have 4 in attendance. Also joining us is Mayor Jim Donchis, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, Nancy Trask, Human Resources Manager, and Alderman O'Brien.
That is correct. Okay, we will start with public comment. If anyone would like to speak on anything, we'll be moving on this evening. Please come to the mic and state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Paula Johnson. I live at 15 Westbourne Drive. I'm here talking about O-25056, rules for remarks by aldermen at meetings. You know, if we have each speaker is limited to speaking once per remarks by alderman period and is limited to 3 minutes during said period. You know, you limit us to 3 minutes and nobody cares what we have to say. And sometimes members of this board go on and repeat the same message. It's time that the board starts having some rules for themselves. And it would be nice if you're conducting rules on us that you are limited to. Also, relative to R-25158, relative to non-binding ballot referendum concerning the Keefe Auditorium. If I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I remember we had a non-binding referendum regarding the Performing Arts Center, and somehow it cost us a lot of money. I think the Keefe Auditorium is a landmark in this city. The problem is, and the sad thing is that we don't maintain any of our buildings. We don't maintain city buildings, and so now we're going to be building another public works building, and we don't maintain our schools that we're like $3 million or whatever in deferred maintenance. So we don't take care of anything, and then we want to save it, and in order to save the buildings, it's going to cost us $25 million or more dollars. So it is a landmark. To tear it down so we can put more housing in that area, that some of it, if we go by one of the plans, the first plan, it's going to be out of the character of the neighborhood. I think there should be some way we preserve this building. Maybe we should take up donations like we were supposed to do for the Performing Arts Center that never happened, and somehow keep this building and don't tear it down. This is a landmark to this city. We're going to put it on the ballot. People aren't going to understand sometimes what the language is because we kind of construed the language a little bit and another non-binding but $25 million. So somehow we need to keep this building without costing the taxpayers any more money. This year we're getting a 6% tax increase. What's going to happen next year with $25 million? Thank you.
Any additional public comment? Seeing none. Communications?
There are none.
Interviews?
Up first for the Keefe Auditorium Commission, we have 3 candidates. Dan O'Donnell, new appointment, term to expire May 13, 2027, 49 Cobbett Lane, Hollis, New Hampshire. Sean Smith, new appointment, term to expire May 1, 2028, Nashua High School South, 38 Riverside Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. And Dennis Schneider, term to expire June 10, 2028, 32 Clearview Drive, Nashua, New Hampshire.
I understand that a couple of these appointments are President Wilshire's, but the mayor will be introducing us.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So, as you may recall, the appointments to this commission are mixed between the President of the Board of Aldermen and myself as mayor. Mr. O'Donnell and Mr. Smith are President Wilshire's appointments, but I said since I was going to be here, I know them very well, so I'd be glad to introduce them as well as my own, who is Dennis Schneider. So let's begin with Dan O'Donnell, who's first on the agenda. Mr. O'Donnell was a longtime employee of the school department, serving as assistant principal over at Nashua South for, I think, around 15 years. Before that, he was the music director for the district for a number of years. His education is actually in music. He was trained as a music teacher, music educator. And in addition to his work for the school, for the city, he was served for a time as president of the downtown, the Great American Downtown Board of Directors, and has become a realtor since his retirement from the city of Nashua. So given his background, I believe he is well qualified to serve on the Keefe Auditorium Commission. And with that, I will just turn it over to Dan for any comments he wishes to make and for any questions that you might have for him.
Thank you. Is this on already?
It
Okay.
is, they're very directional.
Oh, okay.
I get yelled at all the time.
Very good. I was a marching band director, so I probably don't need one. You
I'm a
can
mom.
attest to that, right? Anyway, thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you for Lori for, nominating me to be on this. I've had a lot of history with Elm Street. First of all, I grew up in Nashua, went to Nashua High School, and, graduated in '74, so that was our school. And went on to eventually, go to Berklee College of Music, come back, become the band director following Steve Norris. And so I performed a lot of concerts in that building. Eventually went on to, got a couple master's degrees in supervision and administration. At first, I was in charge of the 19 schools for music, but then after that, I, for some reason, decided to agree to become an assistant principal. That was fun, too. But the time I spent those years at doing concerts at Elm Street and stuff like that, and at Nashua High School South, were great ones. I think that it's a little bit of a Herculean task. When Lori asked me, I'm like, I could see everything coming. I think, I can see people being, yes, we have to save, and people going like, no, we don't want to pay for it. It's like, well, you can't have both. So it's a big task, but it would be great. Hopefully some could be worked out. It is a historic building, as Ms. Johnson mentioned earlier, and it's a totally different building than what you have downtown for the Performing Arts Center. It's you've got to be exact, 1,464 seats at Elm Street, unless they added some since I used to count tickets, and you've got 750 downtown, but totally different types of venues. Like you can't fly stuff in the downtown one, and and so there's a number of reasons why it would be great to hold on to that beyond its historic value. And there are a number of arts groups in the city that really need that. That being said, I think that a lot of consideration has to be given to information that's already been gathered. We're not even haven't decided quite yet. My understanding is what you want to do with the rest of Elm Street, whether it's going to be torn down, whether it's going to be built to apartments, what's going to happen. That's a big piece of it. But then beyond that, I'm aware that years ago, I think it was the Harriman report or something that gave a lot of information on that building that would be interesting to see, and see what they came up with for what that building really would need or whatever. And then just talking to the various groups that would be involved there, what they see as their needs, and just the three major groups in Nashville that use it now isn't enough. So there's a whole big discussion that would have to happen around where else do we, how else do you to account for how do you get this return on this investment, right? So with that in mind, it's a little Herculean task, but I think it would be, it's valuable to do, it's important to do, and I'd be very interested and happy to answer any questions if anybody has.
Madam
Questions
Chair,
from the
just-
committee?
Just before we proceed, I'd like to record that Alderman Lopez joined us at 7:05.
Alderman Lopez, can you please let us know if you can hear us and why you're attending remotely?
Yep, I can hear you, I can see you. There's nobody in the room with you, but I couldn't get downtown and after the meeting was there.
Okay, great. That means all votes need to be roll call. Okay, so we'll take questions individually because I think the nature of questions might be different for each person we're interviewing. So if there are questions from the committee, from Alderman Clemens.
So I don't have any questions. You seem to really have answered some of the questions that I would have had for you. I'm glad that you're willing to take this up, because I know that you have the background, not only, you understand what that kind of space can do, right? And so, and the kind of benefit that it brings to the community that we don't really have anywhere else in the city. So, I hope that the committee gets off the ground, and I just appreciate the fact that you were willing to step forward. So, thank you.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also don't have any questions, but I did just want to remark that I'm really glad to see this committee seems to be coming together, and we are getting some very strong candidates. I was really glad to hear the mayor introduce you as Mr. O'Donnell, because that's the way I only choose to know you. But I honestly can't think of a better candidate. I mean, I wouldn't hazard a guess whether you or Tony spent more time in there during your terms at the front of the band, but if there's anybody that knows that space, that knows that building, and knows the needs and the strengths and the shortcomings of it, it certainly would be you. So I'm thankful that you're putting your name forward and you're willing to take this on in addition to all the other things that you do. So thank you for that.
Other questions? I see your hand. Alderman Lopez, go for it.
So obviously, as Ward 4 Alderman, I'm very interested in the developmental part of this, trying to see the Keefe Auditorium saved, and then understanding how we can do that in a way that fits in well with the community. And I think it's a great amenity for the community. The neighbors living there can walk to a show. But I don't necessarily think we should wait until we're talking about development. What about managing shows? And I think Alderman Clemens could correct me if I was wrong, but I believe the committee was also supposed to kind of oversee the community's access to using that space and being able to run performances. I know the city's managed to organize one or two, but is that something that you might be able to help with while as the community starts to get large enough to actually do that as business?
So you're asking if,
Mr. O'Donnell?
could you repeat that again? I'm not sure what the exact question was.
So the Keefe Auditorium right now is functional. Nothing's happened to the Elm Street Auditorium. We've had one major performance there, but it was underutilized for the last couple of months before that. And it was my understanding that the committee would also be able to help select acts or increase
Right.
access or oversee the site.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I mean, just thinking about today, my mind was going in circles. I mean, first of all, this city would have some use of this too, obviously, because I know that when you do your, the mayoral inauguration and stuff like that, you use, and, my idea would be to find out who else is using that space, who else may need this space. Is there an availability of, like, the community music school, for instance, to have a bigger venue and be able to do some things they can't do now? I've heard, in the news, you hear stuff about different arts groups, losing funding, and I don't know what's happening with that, but, there may be a way to make sure they stay, there in the community to help too. That's a great thing. So I think there's a lot of things that you have to think about, and there are other venues, there are other, Dennis and I was talking earlier, there are other groups around the area and stuff. I don't know that they're all going to flock to Nashua, but there may be some type of thing. It could open up possibilities that couldn't happen before. The problem was before, I think the symphony would normally have done more concerts. I think the actor singers would have done 4 or 5 shows a year if they had access to it, but they didn't because it was a school. Now it's not going to be. So that changes, what they can do and, what can be allowed. So, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to figure all this out.
But I think it's important that we use the space at minimum while we have it. And I know from my own experience with Court Street that the city does approach things from like, okay, well, you registered this way, this makes sense to do it. But a lot of groups were confused because you had to go through the Ritz department, not the Court Street. There wasn't a visible face, and I think as an Elm Street committee stands up, it will become visible. So either you would be able to be an ambassador to whatever the city's process is, or maybe even advocate for how to make it more visible and accessible.
Yeah, I think I would hope that the committee would, be coming up with some protocols on how to use that space. and what you need to do to be able to qualify there. In fact, you have to have insurance, a number of things you'd have to do before you could use it. But yeah, no, I see it. And as far as using it like tomorrow or something, I don't know where that's at. I don't know if any, what condition it's in terms of if there's any other safety checks that have to get done for stuff or whatever, since, people have been in for a while. So, certainly I think the first thing is go look at it and find out what it needs immediately. I do think ultimately you're going to have to, obviously it's going to cost some money to do it. You've got to move heat over there. There's all sorts of things that have to happen. So you can't start booking a bunch of stuff there and then do that at the same time. So
Yeah, they recently did a presentation of Legally Blonde, I think in May. So it might be good to do like a review of that and figure out what worked and what didn't.
yeah, that'd be fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep.
Great. Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So I know that you're just being nominated, and this is you haven't had time to really think about it, or probably you haven't certainly met with the other committee members because they haven't been chosen yet. So I know that it's difficult to drill you about what your plans are, what you're going to do, because you really don't know at this point. But I'd like to say to you and the other candidates that it is, the Elm Street Auditorium, the Keefe Auditorium, is a functioning place right now. I mean, the heat hasn't been turned off.
Right.
Nothing's happened.
Right.
So, and I saw recently that the New Hampshire Symphony has scheduled several concerts there in their upcoming season.
Yep.
So it is usable,
Yep.
and I would hope you and the other committee members would would look for ways. I don't know if you have to hire someone to manage the place. I mean, I know you're a volunteer, so I know your time is limited, but I would think that there would be professional acts that would, welcome the opportunity to find a place that holds 1,500 people. And, it may not be ideal in the summer because it doesn't have air conditioning, but in the rest of the year, it's perfectly usable. And, I would hope that, along the lines that the other speakers have said, that you maximize the use of it while we have it, and to kind of, help us understand,
Yeah. Well, I'd agree with you. I think the only thing I'm saying is I don't want to get ahead of myself either,
Right.
because maybe things that I'm not aware of because I'm not in there daily anymore. I've been retired for 10 years from the school district now. But I don't say whatever's scheduled there is scheduled in. We obviously, quite frankly, the more you can get done there while it's there, the better you are off. In the meantime, there's a lot of work that has to go on. At some point, there's a timetable that have to be made,
Right.
depending on how you move forward, and that's going to affect the booking of it. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to do as much as you can. I don't see a reason why you can't. And I'm very confident, by the way, of the other, I know you mentioned about, being nominated in this. With the other people, it's no surprise to me, the other people that they picked on this as well, that I feel very comfortable with and, serving the committee with. We come at it from different angles, and, and I think that's really important. I think you'll have a good group of people together from the people I've seen.
And, you mentioned the fact that it's not being used as a school anymore makes it much more available.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, we can now serve alcohol there, which, a lot of people that go to events like this, kind of expect and look forward to. That's something else that your committee might consider. And, and you as the committee, if you find needs, you answer to the Board of Aldermen. So if you say we need to hire a manager or whatever, come to us and say, this is what we need, and then
Right.
we can decide whether we can do it or not. But,
I agree with you.
but thank you for being willing and stepping forward, and
Thanks,
I
Alderman.
hope you're successful.
Thanks. I'm sure we will be.
Mr. O'Donnell, is everyone all set? Okay, I have a question. So thank you. Obviously, you have an incredible background for being on this committee, so I appreciate your willingness to serve. I am a bit of a music geek, so I'm interested in a hypothetical here in terms of, it's probably been a while since you've been in there, but if you, as a musician, had something you wanted to change, what would you do?
What do I want changed in there? I mean, ideally, if you're going to do it, you can't do it halfway. I mean, you got to do it the right way if you're going to have groups that are going to want to perform there and you're going to attract that type of venue beyond the 3 or 4 groups we have to use it now. But I'm thinking, you know, I'm sure that Dennis will have some ideas too, but as far as the flies going, all that, and how updated that is, or whether it needs to be updated more. But also, like, sound system wise, I've always said, being a musician and having taken acoustics courses, like, that's not a great place for acoustics, you know. So, but again, all things in due time. But I think those things are important: having a good sound system, having good acoustics, having the stage be a safe place too, because now it's, you know, the more it's used, and the more that things get worn. So yeah,
Good
I
answer.
think there's probably a lot of things directly behind the auditorium is where we used to have the band room, the chorus room, and that's like a tiered space, which ultimately have to be changed. And it's designed, I would think, because it's not a very functional space the way it is, but there might be another way to do that. You know, you've got classrooms in the very back behind that, one step beyond that. You got classrooms off the right. I don't know where the building would be cut off, but, you know, you need to have changing rooms. You need to have, you know, there's all sorts of things. You might need to have, you know, some areas for storage, you know, for that stuff, for shows coming in, shows that are there. And that's something that you don't have to necessarily do now. People bring it in, like the actual things bring it from their hall, or, you know, simply bring it. But there may be a point where you're going to want some of that stuff stored there on a regular basis. So there's a whole bunch of things that have to be looked at that aren't there currently in terms of infrastructure type stuff, so.
All right, thank you. If there are no additional questions from the committee, we can move on to your next candidate, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next nominee, again made by President Wilshire, is Sean Smith, currently Director of Facilities for the Nashua School District. Obviously, he's got a lot of knowledge and expertise regarding this facility because it is in part of a school building. But Mr. Smith also has a background with the United States Coast Guard. And as the manager of facilities, he is involved in all of the school building projects. So definitely work is going to be required there if the auditorium is going to be preserved. And he has professional insight into the procedures for updating facilities and school buildings. And so that will also contribute to his qualifications. That also contributes to his qualifications for this committee. So although nominated by President Wilshire, you know, Mr. Smith is a very strong nominee for this commission, and I now just give it over to Sean to add anything that he wishes to.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Delighted to be here. My background in musical and entertainment stuff is admittedly sparse. I vaguely remember an instrument when I was a kid. I think it was called a melodica, which was something you blew into and had a keyboard on it. I don't even know if they make those anymore. Do they still make them? Okay. I actually still have it. It's somewhere up in a closet gathering dust. But that was the extent of my musical and performing arts, except for when I was in grade school and my parents made me go up on the stage and dance around with all the older kids. But that's it. I'm happy to say I've only had 2 jobs in my life. One was with the Coast Guard, and I was in there for 21 years. And then now I've been here, and I'm in my 28th year. And I've greatly enjoyed my time here. I really sink my teeth into maintenance and construction and renovations. So as you indicated, there's going to be a fair amount of that with this structure if it stays in place. I also did serve on the Auditorium Commission for I don't know how many years. That was 20 plus. I was told it was a lifetime commitment, so I guess I'm just sticking with it.
No escape.
No escape, yes. But I have my ideas on the things that we could done to modernize the facility. We actually have worked very closely with Dennis in trying to bring it up to speed. We've put a lot of money into it, probably 12 years ago, give or take. Still have to upgrade the lighting, we have to upgrade the sound system. I would like to see the ventilation system upgraded as well. That's ancient. And you hear about people holding things together with baling wire and chewing gum. It's old. Depending on what you do with the rest of the school, you're gonna have to get your heat from someplace. So we're probably looking at a new boiler room, furnace, heat pumps, some sort of technology to heat it. I would like to see it cooled also, because you mentioned you can't do anything in the summertime because it's hot. And if you provide some economical cooling, you don't have to get it down to 68 degrees, but get it into the 70s and people can sit there comfortably in the summertime. The other thing you have to do is bring in electricity from someplace. It's right on Lake Street, so it's a pretty short hop from the street itself to the facility. We'd have to create an electrical room. So, I'm happy to be here. I've been maintaining buildings for a long time. I did it for 4 years while I was still on the Coast Guard before I came here.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. So, and thank you for volunteering. I had actually asked Alderman Wilshire if she would reach out to you, and I'm glad that you said yes. On my tenure here on the Board of Aldermen, I've always admired what you've done with our school buildings, with the limited budgets that you've had, and where that facility very, very well. All of our school facilities well. I thought, where we are trying to do this in the most economical fashion, there was no better person to have on this committee. And so, thank you for volunteering. Some of the things that you addressed, I'm hoping that we can get answers to when we speak to some of the architects. Because I think that there's an opportunity there to have them go back to the drawing board, or at least ask them to do so, where we could, instead of separating that auditorium off on its own, it could be condexed, right? So whatever heating or in air conditioning system they build for the rest of the building, they could also include the keef, separate meter it out, right? And it could be its own space, but it could be attached to whatever, heating and cooling system they create. I think there's opportunities like that there. It's a matter of are they willing to entertain that? Are these companies willing to go back to the drawing board, so to speak? I think there's a lot of questions that we as a board haven't got to answer, haven't got answers to yet. So, I think there's still a little bit of work to be done in that regard. But it presents an exciting opportunity, because I think overwhelmingly, this board indicated that we want to explore all possibilities to keep this theater going. So my question to you is, I know that you had gone on a tour, I think it was maybe last year or early this year of it, where you looked at the potential of maybe some existing buildings behind there to be utilized for part of that space. Can you expand on that and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we looked actually probably 15 years ago. Backtrack. The absence of bathrooms is kind of astounding for a facility that big. We worked with Dennis on this one. We came up with a design that would provide bathrooms, a green room, a concession stand, and on the second floor would be all the air handling equipment. The thought all along was to look at tapping off the heating system, the trouble with the existing heating system, it's a steam heat, right? And for the last 5 years, while it was a school, we were combating steam leaks all the time, through the floors. It wasn't just a pipe in a wall. Outside the cafeteria, there's steam coming out and very hot stuff, so we had to address stuff like that. So I think the space behind the auditorium, where we used to have the chorus and band room, that's a potential space to put something. Our thought was to take, we called it 62 Annex, I think it was built in 62. It was that strip of classrooms that borders the old bus loop. So you could turn some of those spaces into green rooms or what have you. We thought about, well, if you, depending what you do with the building, if you kept that hallway on the school side of the auditorium, there's a lot of space there. And if you need additional bathrooms, that's another good place you can put them. A lot of plumbing you have to put into it, but those may be cheaper ways than to just do an addition to the place. If I answered your question.
Yeah, no, it does, and I'm hoping that, you know, again, I'm hoping that we can have a discussion at this level, which then would be brought to you to then have, you know, further discussions of, you know, what could be done, or what could we save, what could we change on those architectural plans to make this happen, you know, in an economical way. So, so anyway, I appreciate you moving forward, coming forward, and I will certainly support your nomination.
I have a clarifying question, just your answer there. You said that you had considered places for a lobby, et cetera. Was that within the existing footprint, not adding anything additional?
Originally, we looked at adding something on the Lake Street side. It's supposed to be a long, somewhat narrow, but wide enough to have bathrooms, for men and women, and a green room in front of that. And we didn't really address storage too much.
Lobby concessions.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Lopez and then Alderman Jettie.
So first, I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing, what was your role in the Coast Guard? Because you were there for 20 years.
I went through the Coast Guard Academy. I came out, was a deck officer, so I was stationed in Boston at first. Back then, you put together what you called a dream sheet. And all my choices, my dreams were east of the Mississippi River. So I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean going to Europe for a cadet cruise, and I got called by my detailer and said, Mr. Smith, we got this great opportunity for you. It's in Alaska. And it's kind of not east of the Mississippi anymore. So,
If you go far enough, it is.
yeah, it depends which direction you go. So I was up in Alaska in boating safety, then I went to graduate school. When you go to graduate school, then you owe them. Yeah, so at that point, I became a shoreside engineer and worked in research and development. You may have heard of the Exxon Valdez spill up in Alaska. So we did a lot of research on how to collect the oil from the water and mitigate those sorts of disasters. Then I came up to the Coast Guard Academy. I was an assistant facility engineer there. And so when it came time to retire, I looked back at the various things I'd done and said, I really enjoyed that facilities job. So when I got out and I started preparing my resume, then I sent, I first thought I'm going to go to college, but I only had 4 years as an assistant. Most colleges want a little bit more than that. So I figured I had to go to public schools first and further my resume. But then I got it to Nashua. I liked it here. I was born in Peterborough, so it was close to home. And here I am.
Well, I was just curious because I don't know where I guess I do now, where you got your skills for logistics, for organizing, for facilities maintenance, but I've been very impressed serving with you on the Joint Special School Buildings Committee. I feel like all of the more senior aldermen were well aware of your qualifications, and none of them told me. But one wonders where that comes from. But I think you're exactly the person we need for this job, and I think the city will be better for it with your insight. I was not even aware that there was already sort of a prototype plan that was in process, because it really wasn't brought to us by the parties that have professed to give us their opinions on whether or not we can save the keep or how much it would cost. And I think a more qualified, intentional approach is called for here. And I really appreciate you being willing to step forward on this. I appreciate Alderman Clemens for thinking of you and having that thought, because I mean, you're working right across from you once a month, every month the last couple, and it didn't even cross my mind, but you are the perfect man for the job, so I appreciate the nomination.
Thank you.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you again. I don't know anyone that knows the building better than you do. So I think you're a great addition to the committee, and I'm glad to hear you utter the words heat pump. I'm glad that you've moved away from gas-fired boilers, and so I'm encouraged that you're looking forward, not backward. Thank you.
I wouldn't say I've moved away from those other things yet. You want the best solution for what you need it for. And I'm certainly open to alternative ways of heating and cooling our buildings. We've put solar now on 4 different schools and hope to continue that through the next few years. So it's, yeah, alternative energy is a good thing.
Any additional? I just want to thank you. I think we know very well your qualifications here. And I think that there's a lot of discussions and thoughts that will start happening within this committee and really within this chamber. So I know you'll bring quite a bit of knowledge and information forward. I was appreciative to hear the talking about AC. I actually went to the Legally Blonde show. I think we maybe need to not just limit it to summer, because when that thing is packed, even in May, it gets very warm. Mm-hmm. I know. Okay. We'll take up your nomination after we do our final interview here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next person I'm introducing is a nomination that I've made. You probably recall that I had nominated Alicia Gregg, and she was interviewed here last month, I believe, and approved by the Board of Aldermen. So I'm pleased to be nominating Dennis Schneider, who I think everybody is familiar with, although his background is in engineering, beginning with DEC, and you see from the resume many other jobs after that. There's probably no one that's been more active in live theater and here in Nashua at least than Dennis, in the sense that he's been doing the technical lighting and sound for the actor-singers for how many years? Many. He can't even count.
75 shows.
75 shows, and therefore has used this auditorium many times. And he has been also on the Auditorium Commission in its previous incarnation. And so I'm happy to be nominating and introducing Dennis because of his extensive experience with the performing arts and with this particular facility. And I'll hand it over to Dennis and let him add anything he'd like.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Donchis. Good evening, and thanks for hearing me out. So I think the Keefe Auditorium is a treasure that we owe the best effort to retain. And I think the best effort to retain means it needs to fit into the community, it needs to fit into the fiscal plan, and it needs to fit into the support for the groups that use it, but that won't be sufficient, in my view, to keep it busy and occupied. So the notion about bringing other things in, I think there's the business plan that has to get built for what would be it is the largest proscenium stage in the state of New Hampshire. It's larger than the Capitol Center. It's larger than the Palace. It's smaller than the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. And so, we have the opportunity to build a magnet for arts performances, but I think it does need to fit into all of those things. And I think that's a complicated puzzle. I think the developers' plans that were reviewed, I think one did a more aggressive job of integrating the facility into their plan. The other kind of said, well, here's a building, have a good time. I think ultimately something in the middle is going to have to happen. So I think we need we as a city need to figure out how does it make sense? What's the structure that runs it? I think you asked about the idea of a manager. As the guy who worked with the city administration to mount the only 2 shows that have gone up in the Keefe. Keefe is in fine shape. The building is a giant empty cavern, and the bathrooms are still the same bathrooms. The weather is still the same weather. The needs are still the same needs. I think we have sort of 3 phases to figure out. The farthest one out is when it's all rebuilt and it's gorgeous, how's it run? What does that mean to the city? When it's being torn apart, what do we do with the arts groups in the city? And then until then, there's the easy part, which is organizing the use by the arts groups, which the commission did successfully for over 20 years. The commission was originally formed to keep the conflicts between the school department and the administration out of City Hall. That's a fact. It moved to building a very collaborative approach between the school department and the users. So when it came time, for example, to replace the lighting system, 15 people came in and helped tear out the old one at no cost to the city. We can do things like that. We're not going to renovate the Keefe Auditorium with volunteer labor. So I think we have a challenge. I think that we owe it to the city to do it. I've been here since '82. I have spent probably as many hours in that building with school productions, helping them with their stuff, than I have with anything else. And so, there's the possibility that the schools could do combinations of shows where their current auditoriums are insufficient. Lots of that are opportunities, but the big question is how do we make sure that, 20 years from now we look back and say, we're glad we did this.
Questions from the committee? Alderman Clements.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank you for stepping forward and your previous service on the committee. You reached out to me early on when the original plans came around about redevelopment, when we knew that the school was closing and it was going to move over to McCarthy Middle School. And at that time, we had not yet had an RFP presented to us. And it was clear to me that there was a lot of support in the community to make sure that whatever plan we did with the Elm Street property included the theater. And when we originally got the RFP from the administration, it didn't have that clause in there, and so we amended that here at the Board of Aldermen. It was passed with 11 votes, and I think it sent a strong message out, and we got some very strong proposals back. But I think they could, frankly, I think they could be stronger. And so we'll work on that. But I guess my question to you, where you were the previous chair of this for a very long time, is where do you see this committee starting? You kind of mentioned it in the 3 phases, but what would be your first priority when this convenes to try to move this agenda forward?
Mr. Schneider?
Thanks for the question. Nothing like putting me on the spot, but it's okay. I think, in all honesty, the forward operating model is the first question to come up with. Who, other than the groups, the symphony and actor singers, and please understand, minimally it's 1,000 seats. So not many groups can actually use 1,000 seats in a stage with a full fly system that needs technical knowledge to operate and needs a sound system that can fill that hall. That costs money, that costs time, that needs expertise. Only 2 groups really in the city today still have, the big enough draw and the capability. So job one would be to realize that's not enough. In that plan, there's, let's take a dart toss. Director Smith is great at coming up with kind of like, if we had to figure out what the numbers might be, the numbers will look like this. How do we pay for it? Operating. Let's leave the capital plan as a separate plan. That will tell us what the capital plan needs to be. I mean, do we need a giant bay in the back to roll in 40-foot semis that bring touring Broadway shows to town? You know, if that's a use, we need to do something different than we did at the PAC, because it's impossible to bring those sorts of shows to the PAC because the logistics will never work. Now, that's one very attractive use for the space, but it means changing the space to meet that spec. So I think the capital plan then builds on the use plan. So it's forward operating model, then it's what does that look like and what does it cost? And then frankly, keeping the current groups, I mean, the symphony and actor singers, so the director of the symphony and I have worked together for years and years on sharing things at Keefe, and that will simply continue. And the city, by the way, has done an excellent job of, you know, putting together in a very short time the support needed by the groups and being able to be very accommodating. So my compliments to Director Cummings and his whole team. But at the end of the day, I think that's the sequence. I think you have to come back from the operating model, because otherwise, you know, like if we were just trying to, you know, like rent it out, whatever else, I'm deeply worried they will never pay the bills, and the number of places that need and can afford the, you know, pain in the neck that 1,000 seats and a fly system mean, it would limit that plan. But I think that's to be seen. I think we have to ask too, you know, like poll the local groups that might want to. I think Court Street's was and is kind of the mecca for most of the teams, most of the arts groups in the city, because it's about the right size, is, you know, 250-ish seats. So that'd be my on-the-spot instant answer.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And it sounds like a very good way to approach it to me. You know, I think the committee is charged. That is one of the probably going to be large focus of the committee, is to come up with a capital campaign, right? And I think the approach to that you're mentioning makes a lot of sense. Is to figure out what is that use case. And I think, you know, to your point, I think it's important to the community that it be available to the community, continuing to be. But I think on the balance of that, though, is we have to recognize that, you know, there has to be a professional part of it, right? There has to be, like, in the future where, you know, you have something along the same lines as Spectacle, where they're bringing in professional acts in between when the community can use it, you know, and so striking that balance, because we have to pay the bills at the end of the day, and that's how you do something like that. So I hope that, you know, I believe in this. I think that the community, this is something the community will rally behind, and I think you're a great addition to this, and I know that this will be successful. Well, thank you.
Additional questions or comments from Alderman? Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just really briefly, I just wanted to commend not just the folks who selected our candidates, but our candidates who've all come here tonight, as well as Representative Gregg, who joined us last month. That I'm feeling very optimistic about this committee. It's new. It's got an insurmountable task in front of it. But already we've seen a wealth and a variety of skill sets and knowledge. We have folks from state government and community theater. We have folks with backgrounds in the schools and the performing arts, shared amongst the three gentlemen here tonight, as well as incredible acumen for business, as well as facilities maintenance. And so you really couldn't ask for a better committee to be coming together. I mean, you guys got, like I said, an impossible task in front of you, but I'm feeling very encouraged that all of you are up to it. So I just want to thank you all for being willing to give up your time and your efforts for it, because Again, I think the appetite's there. We've heard from the public that the preference would be to see the Keefe stay a part of the city, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys can bring us. So thank you all.
Additional questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Chair, sorry.
Thank you. And my understanding, Mr. Mayor, is that Oscar is not able to attend this evening.
No, he's not, so maybe next month.
August. Thank you. Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
You said August will be our next meeting?
Yes, we are not meeting in July.
Fair enough. All right, you're up.
Discussion.
Classification and compensation study for unaffiliated employees.
Director Cummings? That's your cue.
Would you like us to come up?
Please.
Okay. Again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Joining me up here from the Human Resources team, Lizzie Govea and Nancy Trask. We're up here just to continue the discussion relative to the classification and compensation study for the unaffiliated employees. A communication should have been provided to you in your packet this evening. I'm just going to quickly read it. At the April 3rd, 2025 committee meeting, we presented and discussed the unaffiliated classification and compensation study. We provided a report that followed on the work that we did throughout 2024. We came to Personnel and Administration in September, and then again in December of '24, providing updates, soliciting input, and seeking guidance. We had a lengthy discussion on comparable communities, internal equity, developing the classification plan, and then finally a discussion on the compensation philosophy. At the conclusion of the December meeting, it was agreed we would follow up after the committee had a chance to digest and absorb the information provided. It was generally recognized and understood that no changes would be implemented in the FY26 budget. That would be July 1st of 2025. At your April 3rd, 2025 committee meeting, we came back before you to further discuss the unaffiliated employees classification and compensation draft final report. At this meeting, it was generally understood that with the upcoming budget season before us, it made sense to pause the conversation until we got through the budget, as no changes were going to be occurring in that upcoming budget. And if we did anything, it would be in FY27. To help ease and guide the discussion behind this memo in Exhibit A, which is essentially the main foundation for any upcoming piece of legislation, please note I have highlighted that the fire positions, which I believe are a topic of a separate discussion, are noted. And depending on what the pleasure of the committee is, we can write the ordinance to include those positions, or we could pull them off, as I believe the fire personnel may have a differing plan in place that they would like to execute on. So for background information, we provided the Exhibit B, which is the original communication we had submitted. And so if you just quickly turn to Exhibit A, you'll see basically 25 various grades with the various positions listed out with the minimum and maximum range. It goes through all the unaffiliated positions and characterizes them with updated salary ranges. This is all predicated off of the work that was done in that unaffiliated compensation study that we undertook. We looked at compensation philosophy. That was a discussion that we had with this group. We looked at comparable communities. That's a discussion that we had with this group. And then we developed the matrix and classification plan in a draft form as presented to you. So quickly, that was a quick update, Madam Chair. We're just looking to get some thoughts, some feedback because of next steps. Next steps, ideally, if there seems to be general consensus in the direction that we're going and you like what you see, then we would move forward with putting forward an ordinance, and we would follow basically as outlined in these communications what the ordinance would say. And then it would come back before this body for a formal recommendation and final approval. If we were to file something in the summer timeframe, it's not time sensitive. If we got this done by January, we would make the next budget season, and we would look to implement for FY '27. Thank you.
Okay. I'll open up to the committee for questions or comments. Alderman Jettie.
So I sent you an email today. I don't know, it was just this afternoon, so probably, you probably haven't had a chance to really deal with it, but, for the rest of the committee, what I'm talking about is in this Sunday's Union Leader, there was there's a column that's published every Sunday called, I think it's called City Matters or something, but it's about what's going on in City Hall in Manchester. And they talked about the current Human Resources Director resigning to take another job, but they were complimenting her on having done exactly what you're doing here, having I guess Manchester commissioned a study of their salary and wage schedule, and came up with recommendations. And someone, at one of our earlier meetings, someone along the line said that Manchester had shelved it because they saw the numbers and it was too much, they couldn't afford it, and they forgot about it. Well, evidently that's not true. Evidently they are implementing that plan effective this July 1st. And so, my thought was, it sounded like they're increasing their salary and wage schedule, and in order to retain and attract people. And we are, among other cities in competition with Manchester. So I'm curious, if you don't know tonight, maybe you can get back to us later, but what are they doing? And they're doing it July 1st, and so we shouldn't drag our feet much longer to stay in competition with making sure that we're able to retain our people, and if we need replacements, to attract good people. So do you have any thoughts on that or not?
I do, if I may, Madam
Director
Chair.
Cummings.
Thank you. Alderman Jettie, I apologize. I hadn't had a chance to really digest your email, but I do know you submitted it, so my comments will be more general in nature at this time, but happy to follow up with you specifically on what Manchester is doing. What I can say is Manchester is in direct competition with us. So what they do is something that is very much something we should pay attention to. And we've actually have had the luxury over the years of maybe paying a little bit more than Manchester, actually. So I'll be interested to see when I look at it whether that may be flip-flopping as they're implementing their new plan. I will say our study took Manchester into consideration because that is such a direct competitor for us. So we want to, again, make sure we know everything that we can there, because we'll be competing for that talent. And relative to competing for that talent, we're currently out in the market right now for a CFO. We've posted that position. I think that's a good example of how we're competing. I've personally reached out to some cities and towns to kind of see where their CFO ranges are, and we're low. And so I believe we've gotten some good candidates. I do. So I'm not terribly concerned, but what I do know is that just based on trying to solicit the market, talking to peers and colleagues, we are definitely under what the market would be for that type of position, which is just a hurdle that we'll have to get over. I think we can. We have other attributes besides just compensation, but obviously compensation is one driver that folks look at. Thank you.
Additional questions? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I'm not a member of the committee, but it seems no matter what we do, come up with a new matrix, I've seen this before and everything else, how confident are you in solving the problem of compression? Because that seems to be what is the real root of all, the concerns here. Unions go out and negotiate and then come up and somebody's on the, position on the matrix. Yet, is it annually looked at into what the affiliated to the unaffiliated to make the proper adjustments to eliminate the threat of compression?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Director Cummings.
Great question. The report speaks to it. One of the recommendations is you shouldn't let your compensation plan or study go longer than 5 years. I would recommend between 3 and 5 years is really what the consultants have told us. That's what this study says. We're trying to stay true to that. I think the last time we were here having this conversation was back in like 2018, 2018 timeframe, and it took us 2 years to implement that. So we're looking to stay the course because compression is a very real issue, and it's definitely not something that will just go away. You have to constantly, actively manage these types of things.
Follow up, if I may. So in the matrix, is there a lateral slide over in the matrix to compensate for the compression factor? Or would they have to move up on the ladder of the matrix?
If I'm understanding the question, if I may, Madam Chair, you wouldn't move up in the matrix. You move to the side.
That's what
you
I'm-
move to the right is more of what would be. But moving to the right is predicated on moving to the right is actually market appropriate ranges, and of course, if you are hiring within or if you're hiring from outside in, whatever it may be, if you're low, then you're going to be further to the right than maybe you'd like. That's why you got to stay constantly diligent about this sort of thing.
Correct, yes, yeah. But I'm just wondering, the safeguards, because some contracts, like you say, and I'm glad you come up with a timeline, the longest contract I've seen since being on the board is usually about 3 years. And at the end of that 3 years, that's when the compression factor, comes into play here. So, what would happen in the first 2 years, because it could be that impact,
I think it's fair to say best practices is labor agreements tend to be about 3 years, yes.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. So you're looking for guidance from us this evening. Can you tell me, so there's I believe it was the 50, 60, and 70th
Yep.
percentile, right?
Yep, that's right.
Can you tell me what it would cost to implement each one of those?
I'm going to do this off the top of my head because we had that back in December. I don't think I brought it with me today. So back in February, right. So at the 70th percentile, which is what's before you, we were calculating that it would be about $500,000 to implement.
Per year?
Nope, that would be a one-time implementation, about $500,000 to implement the grid. I believe, and I want to double check myself on this, that may not include, and Lizzie, you may know this, does that include just the changes, or does that include everyone on the grid?
That includes putting everyone on a step on the new
Grid.
classification.
So that would be.
Bringing everyone who's underneath the range up to what the minimum is.
Because that part right there, I believe it would be more like $300,000 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
It was just 100 or 150 or so less than everyone, because that is an option. And then I would have to get back to you on what the 60th was and what the 50th was. I could certainly do that, but back in December, it really seemed like folks were
So
focusing in on the 70th percentile.
Alderman
the
Clemmons?
500,000, we'll call it the approximate 500,000. Does that include like benefits and all and everything?
No, that would be on top.
Okay.
This is just wage salaries.
So do we have that figure of what what everything would cost?
I'm seeing if I
Or
can,
would that not matter because it's,
if I may.
Dr. Cummings?
So I'm gonna say, one, it really doesn't matter. It's a separate, everything matters, first and foremost. Everything matters. But what I would say is it's not necessarily driven by this conversation because it's a separate line item. We know that roughly any given year, the healthcare costs go up somewhere between, I'm gonna say 7 and 10%. So say 10% for this conversation. I'm gonna say a family plan is roughly $30,000. So we know, and that's not gonna change, so you just
Right.
have to add
Okay.
10% on top of that.
okay. So, right, because those costs would go up the same no matter whether we did this or
Correct.
not, right?
That's
So,
correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Senate, then Alderman Jettie, and Alderman Lopez, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along that same line of thinking, the various percentiles that were proposed, you'd included the full packet study here as well with I think it's the 50th, 60th, and the 70th called out. You said that the document that you provided us here contemplates the 70th. Those numbers have shifted?
Yep,
That's correct?
that's correct.
Okay, and so the numbers that I'm looking at here, that's why they vary from the 70th percentile in the study.
Yep. If I may, Madam Chair.
Dr.
When the
Cummings?
study was developed, that was predicated on us assuming we were implementing an FY '26.
Okay.
So we just did an inflationary adjustment factor
Gotcha,
for FY '27.
okay. And the figures that you're contemplating for implementation, that's utilizing these fiscal '27 numbers?
That's what we would do, yes.
Okay.
I had said Alderman Jettie and then Alderman Lopez.
So, could you just remind me, the 50, 60, 70% of what? What is that a percentage of?
Dr.
How do
Cummings?
I best describe that, if I may, Madam Chair? The median pay of our comp set for a specific position. So,
Comp set, I mean,
comparable communities, so if you
Okay.
recall, last summer, we came before you and we had something like 10-ish comparable communities, for various reasons. And so then this would be basically 50th would be the median comp set for that position within the within the matrix. And the recommendation is you never want to go below 50. You want to kind of be right there. And depending on your compensation philosophy, you can do something higher than that. Hearing the conversation, we asked our consultant to look at 50th, 60th, 70th, 80th. We got the feedback that the 80th was really, not necessarily the most appropriate. That was really a stretch, but if we wanted to be competitive, you definitely want to be in that 60th to 70th percentile, which is what we did.
All said, Alderman Jettie?
just one more, if I could. So, just to clarify, when you told Alderman Clemmons that, the benefits, it doesn't matter, I'm thinking what you're saying is that, somebody that's making $150,000 a year, what their insurance cost doesn't cost any more than someone in the lower range. In fact, someone in the lower range may have a young family with several members. It may cost more for those people than it does for the higher paid people because, their kids are gone. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's essentially correct, but it's their percentage share that they pay is all the same. So I believe we're 70-30 split. I don't believe we're 80-20. I would have to double check that, but basically, the employee's contribution is, I believe, 30%, and then the employer's contribution would be 70%. But yes.
Thank you.
All set. Alderman Lopez?
Director Cummings, at the beginning, you had said that we should figure out whether we want this plan to include the fire department or whether we wanted to take that as a separate item. In our last Alderman meeting, as you know, it was pointed out to us that we had already provided funding to address compression in the fire department, but legislation hadn't gone forward to accommodate that. And then it was mentioned later in the meeting that there were as many as possibly 5 different proposals for that. Wouldn't waiting until next year to include them, or this part of it, all in the same package, wouldn't that just overcomplicate things, and wouldn't it make more sense to just start making moves, at least for the department that's come forward very vocally and said they really need this addressed?
Director Cummings?
It doesn't, thank you, Madam Chair. It doesn't matter to us. I mean, you can certainly move forward with, separately, you can move it forward together. I can say this, if you were to move the fire plan forward, they would have the money, it appears, as I understand it, to implement in FY26. That would be the only real distinction. You would have to wait for FY27 to do anyone else in this unaffiliated plan, but that's really it. That would be the only real difference.
So as a follow-up, then I would say that's where my position is we should do it where we can do it now, because number one, that'll signal to other unaffiliated staff that there's hope we're actually going to do this. And if we have the funding for it, why wait when people are working for us now? And this is an issue that's gone on for years.
Do you want to answer, or you don't have to?
My recommendation will always be is to act with equity. So if you're going to do something for one, you do something for the others. I think it's totally understandable that if the fire department's implementation was a year ahead of schedule from an unaffiliated perspective, because they weren't coming in until 27, people would understand that. I also think there's probably going to be a conversation about a phased implementation plan too, and that's okay. I think that's something we could adjust to. I think that the employees, from a morale perspective, would just like to know that something is happening to move this forward more than anything else. But again, it doesn't really matter from our perspective. We can implement it anyway.
I would just like to follow up.
Alderman
and I don't want
Lopez?
to be argumentative, but if you're going to apply the concept of equity, it doesn't mean do everything at the same height. It means address deficiencies to bring people forward at the level that they either need or represents their contributions. And I think the fire department's made it very clear they have the need, and I think their contributions are not a matter of debate. So again, I think the equitable thing to do here is start with who we can start with and then move forward from there.
All set. Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I'm looking at this, and I notice the police aren't in here. Why is that?
If I may, Madam Chair?
Director Cummings?
Yes, so I think there's maybe 1 or 2 police positions actually in there, but it's buried into the matrix. But more to the point, it's because the police, under our structure, are separate already, and they have their own, particularly for the sworn officers, have their own compensation system.
All set. Alderman Jettie?
I guess, yeah. Thank you.
So my question is logistical in nature.
Okay?
First of all, I assume that when this becomes a piece of legislation, we'll discuss it again, and there'll be a fiscal note tied to that.
Yes.
When we do that, I know it's not going to be helpful, but I want to see something around benefits. I know we're saying it may stay the same. Sure. I guess in my mind, if we attract better talent and start to fill roles, there might be an impact there, which is a good thing, but I just want to make sure that we have that in front of us when we do it. And then my other logistical question is around the firefighters, obviously, we've had this in front of us for 2 years. They have the money put aside. We haven't seen the legislation that's being worked on that side. Would that change yours? Would you take them out? You're not sure. Where are we?
I can't really speak to that. What I would recommend out of abundance of caution is you would include them for right now, just so that they have something in place, and if it's not to their liking, they can obviously do something else. Unless they're ready to move forward, and again, if they're ready to move forward, then we could do it on a parallel track. It can be done both ways, depending on what the body may want to do.
And then I just had a follow-up. You talked about a phased approach. Do we have a plan in mind of what that would look like if we wanted to do it that way?
So if I may, Madam Chair, that would be the very next step. So if we are in agreement that this kind of looks appropriate and within reason, then I would work with CFO Griffin, and the two of us would develop an implementation plan. When I originally spoke to him 3 or 4 months ago on this topic, it seemed to be something that we would try to implement all at once, but I think we both recognize that it may be more appropriate to phase it in over a year or two, depending all the other pressures that we may have. And that's what we did back in 2018, 2019 timeframe.
Okay, great. Those are my questions. Alderman O'Brien, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. As far as the legislation, coming in for the firefighters, that's pending. It's already passed the legal muster and everything, and once I get it, I'll sign my name to it, and it'll be before this board. So it's coming. But I think when you look at all these groups, you got to keep in mind, it is a situation of apples and oranges. You take the predominant firefighter contract, you start with the top firefighter step, and the contract is written in such a way that a lieutenant will get 15% more than the top firefighter to do his job. And then between the lieutenant and the captain's rank is 20%. Now, in the city of Nashua, that's where it stops, because the deputy chiefs are not in the collective bargaining unit. They're what we call unaffiliated. That was the problem in the compression. The captains were starting to make almost as much as a deputy chief. How are you going to get somebody to accept a position of deputy chief, which is a lot of work? You're out in the street, you're running fires, you got a lot of responsibility. Case in point, Deputy Chief in Worcester, when those firefighters died, had to physically stand in the doorway to keep the guys from going in and risking their lives because they already lost so many guys. It's a tough position. So you need the best, and in order to get the best, you need to compensate, and I think the fire department has, in a way, worked to solve that. Idealistically, most fire departments have that rank or percentile, and that's how they do it, without a matrix. So in a way, I think the fire service here is trying to basically recreate that, particularly for the top positions. So in other words, when the senior firefighter is making X amount, you know what the deputy chief will be making.
All set?
Yeah.
Any additional questions? Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think if there's legislation coming for the firefighters, then we should probably take them out of this and move forward with the rest of that, for going, into whether it's a phased-in approach or not, starting in 2027. And personally, I would be for the if we're doing it in a phased approach, I would be for the 70%, 70 percentile, because I do believe that we should be paying our employees enough to live in the city. And I think that's what that 70th percentile does. You know, we can't ask people to work here and then send them home somewhere else. It's just not a good look. It's just not what you want. It's not a good morale position. And, you know, it's one thing if somebody wants to do that, but I feel that they should be able to afford a place here if they can find one. That's another issue, but that's a separate issue. So yeah, I would be in support of that, taking the firefighters out and moving forward with the 70th percentile.
All set, Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, my favorite part. Applications to license hawkers, peddlers, itinerant vendors license.
There are none.
Appointments by the mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the following new appointments to the Keefe Auditorium Commission. Dan O'Donnell with a term to expire May 13, 2027. Sean Smith with a term to expire May 1, 2028. And Dennis Schneider with a term to expire June 10, 2028. And to recommend the following reappointments to the Nashua Center for the Arts Board of Trustees. Amber Morgan with a term to expire May 1, 2030. And Abdallah J. Mankara with a term to expire April 30th, 2030. And to recommend the reappointment of Bernadette Melton Plant to the Cultural Connections Committee with a term to expire April 30, 2028. By roll call.
Heard the motion. Any discussion on that motion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Kelly.
Yes,
5 yeas, 0 nays.
that motion carries. New business resolutions.
There are none.
New business ordinances.
In front of us, we have O-25-056, Rules for Remarks by Aldermen at Meetings. I'll make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion is to recommend final passage and discussion. Alderman Clemmons.
Did you hear from the sponsor whether he wanted to move forward with this tonight or not?
I did not. I double checked to make sure I didn't miss an older email, but I didn't say anything. I was surprised. What do we want to do?
I mean, I feel that normally I would say that, you know, we table it to let the sponsor come and speak to it. I think that's the fair thing, but are we having a meeting in July?
We are not having a meeting in July. We don't
So
have quorum.
this would move it to August.
Doesn't seem time sensitive.
Alderman Lopez has his, too.
I'm sure Alderman Clemmons is done. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
done. Yep.
Sorry.
It's all good. Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, so Alderman Tebow approached me about this, following our conversation about public comment and my probing around to see if I could just add it to that so that whatever public comments length was, we could also make the length that our, at the end of the meeting comments were. And I didn't really have an answer how to do it per se, and he did the work, so I think it is definitely fair for him to be present for it, to have the discussion. I don't think it's time sensitive. If anything, people are going to get their chance to talk more, at least until we talk about this. So I think we should just let him have a chance to come in and present.
Are you making a motion, Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I'd like to move the table until our next Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee meeting. Well, wait a minute. Should I withdraw that? I don't know
Alderman
if I-
Jettie, did you have your hand up? I don't want to cut off discussion if you wanted to speak.
Yeah. I am willing to make the motion. I don't want to make the motion until other people have had their say.
No? Alderman Jettie?
I was just going to say, Alderman Lopez, you said Alderman Tebow. Did you mean Alderman Thibodeau?
Yes.
Thibodeau.
I was going to make the same correction. All set? Okay. Alderman Lopez, do you have a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to table until our next committee meeting.
Okay, motion is to table. We need to take that by roll call.
All right. Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes,
5 yeas, 0 nays.
it'll be tabled until our August committee meeting. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Next
Prime
up in
time.
front of us, we have O-25-057, amendments to death benefits in the Board of Public Works retirement system. I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion before us is to recommend final passage. I'm going to recognize Alderman O'Brien as this is his piece of legislation.
Thank you. And may I ask the chair, can I be joined up here with Mr. Dave Fredette, who is the chairman of the Board of Public Works Retirement System? He's the head
Mr. Fredette?
trustee.
Would you like to join us?
Now, you get the good seats here. you know. What has happened here, well, they're getting the seats, I can start to expedite this. But what has happened here is something that's very tragic and very unique. This does not happen a lot. And what we had here is a gentleman who announced his retirement. And before he actually left the job, he passed away. Now, he picked a particular option where he was going to get the large sum, and upon his death, zero compensation for a spouse or something. None of that occurred. And as it stands right now, where that option was chosen, the spouse is going to get nothing. The board feels that this is a situation that needs to be remedied. Now, what's before you? I hate to do this. This will immediately fix that situation. But as a member of the Board of Trustees, we need to revisit and go back to some of the rules and to anticipate situations like this if they should happen to occur again. So this is the beginning of other legislation that may come forward. But this will immediately fix that situation. So this is to allow the widow to get 50% compensation. And that's something that this employee had been contributing to his working career. Has really not much to do with the budget or anything else like that. So it's something that he has contributed to. And I would like to leave and say that this is a very timely matter. We're told by council that this needs to be fixed within this current fiscal year. And as we know, we're on the wane, you know? So this got to be resolved. Hopefully we can get it, with your approval, to get it back to the main board and that we could fix this issue. And I would like to now, if I may, Madam Chair, introduce Mr. Dave Fredette, and he can hit on something I left out, or?
Mr. Fredette, before you speak, can you let us know who was also with you? Because
Yes.
it's not on the record.
With me is John Rich, attorney with McLean in Middleton. I've worked with him for many years on the pension. That's his expertise, one of them. He, I believe, is the director and chair of the tax department at the firm, right? And I can get into this quickly if you'd like, explain a little bit.
A quick overview sounds great, thank you.
First of all, I've been involved with the Board of Public Works pension plan for over 35 years in different positions. The plan is extremely healthy. I think people who've been here for a while know that. We're always between 82 and 92% funded, which is very, very good. We have good investments, and it's the lowest cost pension plan in the city of Nashua, much lower than any other plan we have. I mean, for the cost of the taxpayer, that's what I mean. What happened is, also I should say, Public Works pension plan has been around since 1947. So we've made many changes over the years, and sometimes you might not notice something until it happens. This is very unique. I have never seen it happen in the 35 years I've been involved with the board, the pension board. What happened is an employee had filled out his retirement completely, it was all approved, and 3 days before his retirement date, he passed away. At the time, he had selected what a lot of spouses do. He took a lower pension himself. So if and when he passes before his spouse, that spouse would get more than 50%. I think it's 60% of what he was getting. But because he passed away 3 days prior, she would only get 50%. So it is a significant reduction. So, of course, this all happened at the beginning of the year. I talked to Attorney Rich, and we try to come up with some words to fix this, knowing that next fiscal year, which starts in a month, we want to make some more changes to the word in the plan. He worked on it. The board itself, the Board of Public Works Pension, which is 7 members, looked at it, voted on it. And then Dory Clark wrote up the amendment, and Mr. Rich looked at it. And so I'm here to ask for the approval of this, and it does have to be approved before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So,
Other questions from the committee? Alderman Clemmons, then Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. I'm going to support this 100%. It's a tragic situation, and it would make it much more tragic for this board not to do it.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so I don't disagree, but I have some questions. So the situation has been described a couple of different ways. I just want to make sure I understand it. So we were told that that the retiree, before he retired, that he was going to choose nothing so that his spouse could get more.
no.
But that's not the case, right?
No. They have different options. When a person retires, they can take the option where he would get the highest amount, and that when he passes, the spouse gets nothing, but that is not what he chose. He chose the one that's most generous to the spouse. He chose a lower pension for himself, but if he passes away before his spouse, the spouse would get, I think, 60%, it might be a little higher than that, for the rest of her or his life. So, and the way it's worded, because he passed away 3 days before he actually retired, although everything was approved and filled out, it would give her less than the 60%. So we're trying to just correct that. Because of course, as I said, he passed away 3 days prior to retirement.
Okay, so even
Alderman
though he
Jay?
chose an option where his monthly payment would be lower, but when he died, his spouse would get 60%
Yeah.
of what he was getting,
Yeah.
as opposed to 50%. But because he died before he
No,
retired?
actually, I think I'm saying it wrong. I believe he took a lower amount, like I said, but because if you take that option and you pass away before your spouse gets exactly what you were getting, because he took the lower amount. So I misspoke, I think, on that.
Okay,
All right.
okay, so he chose a lower amount, but when he died, after he retired, he dies, then the spouse gets the same thing he was getting.
Yes, I believe that's the option he chose.
But since he died, so
3
if an
days.
employee dies, an employee who's not considering retirement and dies, don't they get anything from?
No, they would,
Get the statutory.
they would get they would get the 50% amount. If he had not filled out anything, or they didn't know what he wanted or she wanted. I say he because there's a lot more men in the department. They would get 50%.
All set, Alderman Jettie?
I'm sorry, I'm processing the answer. I'm trying
Okay.
to figure out whether I have another question or not.
Well, the spouse gets the person who's retiring gets to pick If he knows he's retiring, they would pick what they want. But if somebody hasn't filled that out at all and passes away, the spouse would get 50% of what he would have got if he had lived.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a little confusing, but I'm not an expert, but I try to understand it.
All set, Alderman Jettie?
Right, Attorney Rich, you agree with what he said? You have nothing to add?
Sure. I mean, briefly an example. Let's say that he had elected a benefit, if he could have elected a benefit of $100 a month, which would have been his benefit. Instead of that 100, he elected a lower amount, let's just say 85 that would have been paid, 85 for his life and 85 for his surviving spouse's life. Because he didn't reach his retirement date, that statutory benefit is no longer applicable. Instead, there's a different benefit under the ordinance, and that benefit is approximately, as Mr. Fredette said, 50% of that earlier benefit. So it's a completely different benefit that is being paid here than was otherwise eligible had he lived the additional days, unfortunately.
This is the first time you spoke. Can you just put your name and your affiliation on the record so that the transcriptionist can understand?
Certainly. John Rich, I'm with McLean Middleton in Manchester.
Thank you.
He
Are
said
you
it
all
better
set?
than me, of course.
Sorry, I'm not usually too particular, but you guys sound very similar. It'll be hard for her later. All set, Alderman Jettie?
I am, thank you. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay.
And I will point out that Mrs. Toomey is here tonight, a longtime Ward 5 resident, many years. And she's in the audience, so.
All set? Okay, thank you. So the motion before us is to recommend final passage. Timing-wise, before we vote on this, do we need to pull this to our next Board of Aldermen?
No, it'll go.
It'll go in time, just making sure for the end of the,
Open time.
I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, great.
Yeah, I'll have the discussion with the president.
Just making sure, I'm like, do we
And
have enough
it-
time? We should.
And Madam Chair, if you want to help expedite that as well with the president, that would work very much for the
Great.
family.
Great. Okay, the motion before us is to recommend final passage by roll call.
Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
Alderman Jettie?
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
And Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes,
5 yeas, 0 nays.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I may, my business here is concluded, and may I seek absence, please?
Good night, Alderman
Good night.
O'Brien.
Thank you.
Who's going to make the motion to adjourn if you leave?
I could. It's always in order.
I would be comfortable making that when it's done.
Okay, so moving on to tabled in committee.
So we are leaving the Keefe on the table, is that correct?
That is what I heard.
And we are also leaving Kratom on the table for the time being?
Also what I heard.
All right. However, I understand there's an appetite for this, so I will make a motion to remove from the table O25-053.
Motion is to remove from the table by roll call.
All right. Bear with me. Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
And Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Switch to my next page.
Okay, so you're gonna,
I think we have to
yes,
make
we
that
do?
motion now.
We do?
All right, so now before us, we have O25-053, updating the taxi licensing ordinances. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion is to recommend final passage. I know Clerk Healy is here to speak on this. Would you like to come forward and speak to the committee?
So for the record, Dan Healy, City Clerk. I believe I was last here in April and this was tabled. I had proposed a few changes to updating the taxi licensing ordinances. I know there were some questions from the aldermen. What I've done is I've made a few changes based off of the statements from the aldermen. I have those if I pass them.
Can you pass those out?
I'll bring a couple
We'll
up
accept
there.
those. You want to, so in order to amend this, we'll need someone from the committee to move to make these amendments, but do you want to talk through them for us?
Yes, so I'll briefly kind of reiterate the changes that I had made initially, and then go into the changes I believe discussed at the last meeting. One of the changes on the first page, this was a change that was done for the original proposal, is just when we get the applications, any person that has interest in the business also being listed on the application. Moving on to the next page, we were looking at updating the fees for both vehicles and for taxi licenses. They really haven't been updated in a couple of years, and as I stated in April, we're relatively low on the fees compared to, say, Manchester. And one of the things that they have is a proration on the schedule. So if a taxi company gets a new taxi in the middle of the year, it's less of a cost to them instead of licensing for the full year. My next change that I'd originally proposed was removing the PDE inspection of the taxi cab. So right now they have 3 inspections. They have their regular annual inspection, they have a mid-year, and they have an inspection at the police station. My proposal was to remove the police inspection. And actually, going over this, I noticed I skipped over non-transferability. If someone hasn't driven for 90 days, then their license would be revoked. Another change I proposed, taxi cabs must be repaired at most within 30 days. My opinion is that it's really up to the taxi company if they want to repair their vehicle. It's probably better for them if they get it on the road, but I don't think we need a timeline. Depending on an accident, it might take at least 30 days for it to even get into a repair shop. So I don't think that's necessary. That was another one of the changes. And I believe that was it. So when I was last here, there was discussion on maybe over-regulating the taxis and removing, so there was a proposal to remove the mid-year inspection along with the police inspection. So I have that under section 300-12, condition of appearance of vehicles. Section A would just be entirely removed, and then the following sections will be moved up. That was one of the proposals by the last time I was here. And then under non-transferability, I'm okay. My original recommendation was to add 90 consecutive days of not driving. The purpose of that is we schedule random drug tests. Well, it's not scheduled. We put in the system for random drug tests, and we've had a few instances where we submit for a random drug test. It pulls 4 drivers, and then say 2 of them, when we actually call to let them know that they need to go for a random drug test, they might not have driven in the last 90 days for that taxi company for various reasons. But I'm okay with, that was a change I proposed. I believe Alderman Lopez wanted either the amount higher, like 120 days, or maybe another proposal, but I'm okay with removing that as well. So those were the two points of discussion, I guess, from the last meeting, were less regulation on the inspections in that 90 days. I did try to look into the regulations for Uber and Lyft, and it appears it's under RSA, New Hampshire RSA 359. It appears that they are regulated in some capacity under state law, which, I mean, I can go into more detail, but there are regulations. They're not regulated through us as a city, but they are regulated under state law. And there's some similar things in the law as far as, zero tolerance for drug and alcohol, making sure that the cars have insurance inspected. There are some similarities in there, but again, I know that came up. It's not regulated. We don't regulate Uber and Lyft in the city, but it appears, based off my research, that New Hampshire RSA 359 does regulate, so.
Okay. Was there one other change to upon passage versus May 1st?
Yes, thank you for that. So originally, I had proposed this ordinance to be effective upon passage, which would have been for this license year. At this point, the majority, well, all the taxis that are currently operating in Nashua are licensed. The majority of the drivers have come in. Occasionally throughout the year, there'll be a new driver that applies, but basically all the ones that we're renewing have done so, or not renewed, but they're not currently driving. So I don't think it would have a big impact this year, changing the fees and all that. It would, if the mid-year inspection is removed, it would just be one less inspection that the companies have to report to us. But yes, it was upon pass, or effective for the taxi licensing year, and now I guess the change would be upon passage.
That's the end of the ordinance. Okay. Is there discussion on those changes? Alderman Jettie, then Alderman Clemmons.
Okay. So I'm looking at this again. So I guess right off the bat, I should say that, I don't want to, offend you in any way, but, providing us with a bunch of, or I don't want to exaggerate, but providing us with some amendments, handing them to us tonight and expecting us to absorb it and vote on it. I personally, I'm not ready to vote on this without having had a chance to review it. So, either it should be tabled, or I would have to vote against it, but I'm just one person. But while I'm asking questions, in section 305 license fees A, we had talked about, it provides, a license for a hybrid electric vehicle to be $1. And the last time, Alderman Clemmons explained that he had put that in there to encourage hybrid electric vehicles. But now, we have electric vehicles. So if you have a hybrid electric, you only have to pay $1, but an electric vehicle would have to pay full price. Is that the way? It seems to me that would be the effect of this, the way it's worded. I don't know when Alderman Clemmons made that change, whether electric vehicles were around.
They were not.
Yeah, so.
Not in New Hampshire.
Right, so I would like to see, that changed to hybrid electric and electric vehicles, to get that incentive. And also, when you were here the last time, I had asked you about, there was pending legislation before the legislature about doing away with inspections altogether, and that's still pending. The last I've seen is that it appears that a compromise is going to be passed where a vehicle that is less than 3 years old would not have to be inspected, but after the third year, then it would have to be inspected. If that, and they're going to vote on it Thursday, I think. So we're that close to it, and that would be another reason where I'd rather wait and see what they do, because if I remind me, you're more familiar with this than I am, but it seems to me the city inspections are worded in such a way that they would occur 6 months after the state inspection.
Yes.
So if there is no, if there's no state inspection, the 6 months wouldn't kick in, if, I'm not sure if the state is not going to inspect vehicles for the first 3 years because they're brand-new vehicles, and I guess the argument is they don't need an inspection because they're brand new. Whether that would apply to our taxis as well. So that's something I'd like to look into. I don't remember where that is. Do you remember what section that is?
Section 300-12 is the mid-year. I don't know exactly where.
Well, you're proposing to eliminate that, correct?
Correct.
Yes, based off discussion at the last time this ordinance was brought up, I'm proposing to eliminate that. I would say that the majority of our taxis are probably over 3 years old. They're on the older side of I believe it's 9 or 10 years that they're eligible to be taxis. They're all on that end. And I kind of have the same comment that I had at the April meeting, is that there's a lot of bills up in Concord. And I think it's better, if something changes in Concord, then we need to revisit that specific part. I would be open to that, but I wouldn't, I guess, hold up an ordinance based on what Concord might do. And I haven't checked in on that bill in a few weeks, but I know it's been in the news and there's a lot of discussion around it. But our taxis, for the majority, I don't think we have any that are even 5 years manufactured within the last 5 years. I think they're all in that 5 to 10 range for inspection.
I'm sorry, I keep asking questions without
Alderman Jenny.
checking in with you. By eliminating Section A, you'd be eliminating the city inspections altogether?
Yes, so for one of the requirements to obtain a taxi license is to provide their proof of, registration, and they would have to have that initial, their vehicle would have to be inspected, for their annual inspection, but this would remove the mid-year. And that was at the request of one of the aldermen at the last meeting. I mean, I would be open to that. My initial request was we have a third police inspection to remove that. And I would say at the minimum, I would like to see that removed. It's an extra burden on these companies to then drive to the police station that can only inspect on a certain day of the month at a certain time. And then if they can't get the vehicle there for whatever reason, they might have to reschedule till the next week if there's an exception made for the police department. So my initial request was to at least remove that PD inspection. I'd be okay with removing the mid-year inspection. If there's any issues with the vehicle, I would assume that the taxi company is bringing it to the repair shop to get those fixed, probably as soon as they're able to. So the mid-year to me, I guess, is not entirely necessary, as well as the PD inspection. But my initial request really was to remove that PD inspection, because it's really a burden on these companies to go to the PD during this set time.
Alderman Jettie? Do you have additional questions?
Yeah, no, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Clements? Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'd just like to comment too. I apologize for giving the ordinance with the changes just tonight. I'm kind of unfamiliar with the whole process when there is changes. I don't know if I'm able to email the full committee, all the changes, or if they should just go through the chair and then being distributed. These were two changes that were discussed at the last the last meeting that this came up, but, and that's why I included them tonight, so.
All right, Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that we can, that I'd be willing to move forward with this because the conversation that we had, this is reminiscent of the conversation that we had the last time, which the changes that you're making basically follow that discussion. I do like Alderman Jetty's suggestion to add electric vehicles to this mix. I would probably further amend it to that. But I don't see any reason to hold it up.
I see no additional discussion. Is there a motion? Alderman Clemmons.
So I would make a motion to amend the ordinance 2553 by replacing it in its entirety with the copy presented this evening. So I'm going to make that motion first,
Okay.
and then I may have subsequent, well, I will have subsequent.
Definitely need some subsequent. Okay, we'll start there. All right, motion is to amend. We need to do it by roll call.
Yes, we do. Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
Alderman Jetty?
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Yes.
5 yeas, 0 nays.
Great. Additional Alderman Clemmons.
Yes, I would like to further amend in paragraph, or section 300-5, license fees, subsection A, which is on the first page here, where it says, for a hybrid electric vehicle, and I would like to add the words, or electric vehicle. So after the words hybrid electric vehicle, you would add or electric vehicle.
Okay. Did you want to make
And-
an amendment to the end as well?
I will, but there's one other portion of this that
Sure.
needs to be amended along with that.
Sure.
And I'm gonna wait for the clerk to tell me he's got my first change.
He's writing
tight.
Okay.
furiously. Not angrily, fast.
We'll say furiously.
I mean, that's alternate. After hybrid electric vehicle.
And the wording you want to add is or electric vehicle.
Yes.
Correct. Wyatt.
Furiously. Handwriting.
I'm ready.
Okay. Go
All
ahead,
right,
Alderman Clemmons.
so in section 300-12, what is renamed C, it says, notwithstanding the foregoing, all four-door hybrid electric vehicles.
Or electric vehicles.
And what I would like to add is it to say, all four-door hybrid electric vehicles or electric vehicles qualify to be used as taxi cabs.
Got it?
So again, we're just adding the words or electric vehicles after hybrid electric vehicles. And I will explain that
Go ahead.
amendment. So there is a passenger cargo volume. So in other words, the taxi cabs can't be compact cars, essentially, is what this says. But as you know, hybrid electric vehicles, although well, back in 2010, when this came out, most hybrid electric vehicles were small little Toyota Priuses type things. Now we see electric vehicles which are much, much bigger, but some of them are still on the smaller side. And so what this recognized was that because of the type of vehicle it was, and because we want to encourage taxi companies to use a four-door vehicle, this would allow a compact four-door vehicle as well. So it makes the exception from the gas to electric to basically say, as long as it's four doors, you can use it as a taxi car. And then I will make the final part of this, which is at the very end. This ordinance shall become effective upon passage.
All right, you've heard the amendments. Discussion on the amendments?
I just have one more thing. So with section A being removed, do you need to make note of that they're being relabeled? In 300-12, section A is disappearing, so everything else would move
Yes.
up.
Right.
Yeah. That's why you said now labeled,
Correct.
Okay.
which everybody will be able to follow because this will be in the packet.
Go.
Okay. Any questions on the motions? All right. When the clerk is ready, he can call the roll.
Just for clarity's sake, the total motion that I have by Alderman Clemmons is to amend section 305A by adding the words "or electric vehicle" following the words "hybrid electric vehicle," and to amend section 312C by adding the words "or electric vehicles" following the words "hybrid electric vehicles," and by changing the effective date to upon passage.
Yes.
All right. Alderman Senate votes yes.
Before you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
take the
Alderman
vote,
Jettie, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. So, as I understand it, so section 300-12, what we see in front of us as A and B will be struck in their entirety. So what's labeled B is now A.
Oh, we should change.
No, there's an A on the left-hand side, correct?
That's 300.
Oh, that's 300, so we miss,
I thought the same thing, and
yeah. Okay.
so I will further amend for 312 to be A, 312 section B to be 312 section A, 312 section C to be B, and
Yep.
312 section D to be C.
You have to keep going.
And I think we gotta keep going. 'cause
The
it
whole,
goes on the
can we
other-
just say that it's effective for the rest of the,
And consecutive down the rest of the way. There we go.
so
follow the
all who are
alphabet.
listening, we mislettered, and we will be starting it with, the city clerk shall be notified in writing as our A. What's that?
Donna's gonna hate me.
Alderman
We need
Jettie.
to vote on that too, I think.
Yeah, so one of the previous motions Alderman Clemmons made was to referenced paragraph C of 300-12.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to clarify?
He made a motion to amend it to the copy in front of us, which was misnamed. So I think when we amended it, we amended the proper paragraph, and now we're just saying it was all
Yeah, the amendment he makes before that precedes the amendment, changing the letters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Oh, did we vote on that? Oh, yeah, we did.
We're still voting on your final amendment, which was the date passage, now the letters, and the
Yeah, this is everything.
and the two vehicle updates. So now it's the Clemens amendment.
Okay.
Everybody's clear? We lost Tom. We still have a quorum. Okay. Clerk?
All right. Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Jettie?
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Yes.
4 yeas, 0 nays.
That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still have to do final.
Final passage
Oh,
is
we do.
amended.
So I would move for final passage as amended.
Heard the motion. Roll.
All right. Alderman Senate votes yes. Alderman Lopez still hasn't joined us. Alderman Jettie?
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Yes, technically, we don't need roll since Tom is no longer with
Oh,
us,
yeah.
but that's okay. We did it.
0 nays. We did it right. Yeah.
Okay, all set? Moving on to public comment. There is no public with us. General discussion? Any remarks? I have a motion.
Yes, motion to adjourn.
You've heard the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned at 3 o'clock.
9:05.
9:05. Good night.